Hi, everybody. There's a couple of questions tonight. I'm trying to make sense of them, and I'll just stick my glasses on. Thanks, Natalie. There's one from Carol Corbet, who asks, she says, in one of your classes before you left the UK, you had mentioned all truths must expand beyond what they are. Could you elaborate on that statement? Do you mean universal truths or personal truths? I mean them all. It's a dilemma with this concept of truth. It's kind of a running crazy battle around the concepts that are out there about almost anything in the world. And it's vital to recognize that your ideas hopefully have changed over the last 10 years, and realize that about every decade you come up with new stuff. But there is some stuff that we marry, and we marry them deeply. And it's a dilemma because we set up our whole organized personality based on those concepts. And it's important for us to do that, at least to some degree, until we can stabilize a little bit and allow ourselves to mature into the idea that some of those concepts may be just ideas that we make important because it makes us feel less vulnerable than we would be if we didn't have any ideas at all that we believed in. Beliefs are very interesting. They're not to be devalued, but they're not to be extremely overvalued at the same time. Because our relationship with others and ourselves is so strongly fixed to belief systems, then in life we find it very difficult to make adjustments and try to understand what other people are about, because we really engage primarily with what we're about. And we tend to habitually engage with assessment based on what we already believe. These universal truths are quite something. You could always say scientifically that if there is such a thing in the universe that is infinitely subtle, and it is in all of us and in life, then we're infinitely unable to recognize that subtlety. That's very scientific, mainly because, first of all, in physics now, they're truly believing that there is a subtlety of some kind. In Switzerland, they tried to find that subtlety, that Higgs boson, or whatever you want to call it, that little bit of something that is so difficult for us to perceive. If there is that subtlety and you call it whatever you call it, to call it something else, universal flow or force, whatever it may be, would be terribly difficult for anybody who might be listening and have a belief system where they've already constructed a formula or a word or two that they call that so-called unperceivable, or let's say subtle, flow. But in spiritual growth, there is a tendency, if you can perceive subtlety, to recognize that flow is there. Some kind of flow is there. There's an ache in every one of us to call it something, and to be recognized that, or being able to call it that something, and everybody should be listening to what that something is that relates to the calling of it, not necessarily the actual occurrence of it. Mainly because in our world, if you talk about something as if you know it, therefore you must be it. And it's just a false premise. There's a relationship with that kind of honesty that has to be inculcated within the individual. Not so easy to do, unfortunately, because we're too busy engaging with the idea of trying to be respected by other people or thought of as being really great or profoundly engaging with something that others may or may not be engaging with. And of course, if you can't perceive that others are engaging with anything, therefore they're not. In a relationship with this universal truth, if you look at it from a universal truth or the perspective of a personality truth, which Carol is asking, if you can leave or learn how to leave yourself open by being honest with yourself, this is a really difficult thing to do, although it should be very easy, right? Everybody understands that whatever you think is actually true. Absolutely not. But at least it's a truth that's relative. It's something that you can allow to be true and feel comfortable with. And the point of view is to be comforted by what you think must be valuable, and you are the thinker and you are the person who's trying to make you feel valuable. That should be noted as something that is real in you. It's very difficult to allow that to be true because it implies that whatever you believe in now will change. Perhaps it won't change exactly, but it will change subtly. You'll perhaps be able to allow yourself to consider the possibility that others relate to the same thing and call it something else or call it exactly the same thing, be that as it may. The truth of the matter is that that relative truth is valuable to us individually, but not necessarily real as it appears to be. Whatever happens, whatever you perceive, however you engage in whatever subtlety you have as a personality, it's awkward to think that your construction of what might be valuable or true may not be real, may not be as true as you think. But it isn't awkward to think that you actually think it's this way now, but that may change. You may be okay with having the right to change your mind at any given moment. That at least will leave an open door for you to grow beyond what you currently believe is so valuable and important with respect to your own self-interest. This is very difficult to do. Inclinations are exactly the opposite, and for good reason, and for a kindly reason. Kindness is to be okay with you and support of you in a moment that makes you feel comfortable. That gives you the courage to move forward into another state. It's too easy to judge other people in relationship to what they think, while you have no idea how they got there. And they got there primarily the same way as you got there. That's a relationship with truth. How they get to wherever they get, remember, it's just a platform for going farther than they are now. That includes you, whoever you are, any you that exists. Makes life very adventurous and very interesting. But it also holds you in a particular place if you're looking at a truth that you can't let yourself let go of. And this is, in a kind of a way, how personalities are built. All personalities are an arrangement between what you fancy and how you think things should be. Most of the time, there is a defensive mode that protects that structure. And it's not a negative defense. It's a defense that you can only manage currently. If you can manage it differently, you have an allowance within you to engage beyond what you believe you have to be like, to be important in the world of you. Usually that indicates a very strong internal vulnerability that exists literally until you move into a state where you can be more honest with yourself. Seeing it as a vulnerability allows you to be okay with moving forward. Seeing it as a place where you must protect that way of being, that image that you've constructed, allows you to remain untouched by something that is beyond what you currently are able to take in as an individual. This is normal in our world. It's neither good nor bad, right or wrong. It's just how it works with us. There is a tremendous kindness. It's akin to loving. It's akin to compassion. That we need to be okay with being subtly able to go into a place that stretches what we believe has to be true. And to not negate how we've been constructed and moved forward from the time of our birth. Not to negate it, but to recognize it and be okay, but not necessarily have to rejuvenate it every time we turn around. Rejuvenation is a strength that we believe we have, and we remain the same within that particular place of rejuvenation, so-called. We're really basically remaining the same, defending how we need to be. Internal growth is totally something different, but it leans on as well the need to have you not reinvent, but reconsider your relationship with how you think you are. This is not something everybody is very set up to do. We've been taught to judge other people's stuff and put it down. That makes us feel better. We've been taught to compete. And competition turns into something related to jealousy. Jealous that another person is this or that or another thing. At higher states, this does not exist. It's not thing-oriented. There's a broadening that occurs at this particular truth level, so-called truth level, because even at higher states, there are higher states beyond higher states. Sounds a little bit ridiculous, but nonetheless. No one likes to think of it like that because they would much prefer to set up a schema about higher states and then hold on to it. And then engage with those states and say, well, I am here and I am there and I am there. This business of I am places you in a position of relationship that is akin to not moving. And self-protection is strong. It creates tremendous levels of anxiety. Being kind to that place, knowing that it's actually there, creates a stretch, a willingness to soften it down. I could put a capital letter on that S, soften, and underline it 100 times. It won't make it any easier. Because when we get into a state that is harshly engaging with defending what we believe has to be there, softening goes out the window. Mainly because we're afraid. We won't be taken seriously, respectfully. It's a dilemma. Your neighbor, you're in some other group that you don't agree with, whatever it happens to be, if they are engaging with a state of spiritual growth, no matter what it looks like, they will move until they hold themselves in a position where their version of being truthfully engaged in a certain kind of a way is recognized by them as the only possible way. This happens over and over and over and over again. It's not negative. It's how we are here on this planet. And we've been like this for a long time. It's very difficult to turn that around because every child is taught that if they don't engage with their own value-seeking orientations and build their own truths, they will not be identified by others as valuable. And to some degree, that's true. It's the way it is here. But as a spiritual person, you deserve to shift into other states beyond the limitations that you hold so dear to you. I don't care what that sounds like. There is no limit to internal growth. The limits that we have are related to us. It's not because we're bad. It's because we're held by the habitual engagement that we have with life. And that's hard to notice because we're not trained to look inside. We're trained to look outside. Dependency exists based on how others believe we are. Looking inside, you begin to realize your relationship with higher states does not depend on that. But you will feel lonesome, sometimes actually miserable, if other people can't actually notice that you're able. But also, at the same time, you will move in a direction that relates to softening down the vulnerability and the fear that you have about being valued by others. It still remains. It's our birthright. Terrible thing to say out loud, isn't it? It's not negative. It's a product of learning how to survive, because others are not attempting to go inside either and be okay with another being of consciousness. Even though they don't have the same belief systems, they are linked up with higher states. There is a relationship that goes beyond the naming of certain techniques, groups, and beyond the devaluation that occurs when another group is versus another group. But no one wants to go there because they will be, in a sense, devalued, and they have to suffer the onslaught of being put down by others because they don't believe what the others believe. There's a state of internal growth that has to do with glowing from those higher states. There are people on the planet, and it's rare enough, but nonetheless are people on the planet who are glowing in those states. This is how they think of another in relationship to their level of growth. Ah, that's where they are. Okay. How can they be helped to go beyond that place which holds them in that position? No negativity is involved with this, but transmission of energy is. And it is a loving kindness. In spite of what you believe, they don't care. They do care that you've been opened in a particular manner that would be interesting and capable of going beyond where you believe you are now because of the importance that you hold so dear for you. That is not a negative thing, but it is a profound thing. There's an internal engagement with some of these beings, but I've been lucky enough to meet some of them, where they are is that their whole system is glowing. What that means is they are perceiving those in the world who are engaged with higher states. There's no verbalization that goes on between these beings. So you don't have to send them your email Tell them your address and your phone number. Give them your name. They're really not interested. But if you show up as a cell in the body of a being that's energetically engaged, they will immediately send energy to that structure, knowing full well where you need it, as opposed to full well how important you think you are in the scheme of things. They have no interest. They are already able and linked up, and they're only here to help. If we had more credibility internally with respect to others, I don't care who it is, your partners, your friends, your enemies, don't care, then we would be perhaps more able to perceive beyond what is acceptable as an individual who is so-called growing spiritually. This is a very rare thing, and only seek to be of service to those who can handle more spiritual development, more spiritual growth, for the purpose of only having them more able. In fact, most folks won't be able to anticipate or perceive these other kinds of individuals because their focal point is on their personality. The importance of them, or the devaluing of others, because they could be more able or not. That's a reality, an interesting test. Our emotional sensory system is always on guard for others who might be more able than us, so that we can downplay a little bit. Put ourselves up, I mean. That's our insecurity. I said that before. If you ever get an opportunity to help another, to engage with them in a way, because you can, in a way that says, let me pull back from my own personalizations so that those higher states can operate through any of these valves, centers, Zephyrat, that have opened even in a minor way, even though we think it's great, so that they can be helped where they need the help, as opposed to where I think I can give them the help so they can know I'm really great. That would be really something for us here on this planet. But it would be part of continual change in us to get to a stage where that would be viable. We would not be afraid of having that happen. We would not even be afraid that no one ever knew we were able, because we would know we were able at that particular point. We wouldn't need the accolades of others. This is very difficult for us. We're very young in our relationship with existence here on this planet. Very young species. We're only about 250,000 years old. And fundamentally, we've been battling others consistently because we're afraid that they're going to battle us if we don't get them first. For who's really more able and better. And this goes on. It's still going on. We need to know that that may not be a way of engaging with higher states, but it is a way of survival, because it has been needed from time to time on this planet. Otherwise, you wouldn't have survived. Internal relationship with a concept that Carol is talking about here, in terms of truth, is fundamental. And you believe that there is a freedom and recognition of these truths. You believe this. You have the right to believe whichever way you believe. It helps you. There's a kindness attached to it. There's a relationship that is there within you that allows you to know that there is a higher state. When that glow is all around you and you're engaging at that particular level, it is only an aspect of a higher state. It's not the whole enchilada. This orientation moves into, if I could take a look at the time, moves into the next question because it's will-oriented. In Carol's question, we are constantly engaging with a willfulness. It's like a competition. This is better than that, and I know that. Why? Because it happens to be the way I think. My way of thinking is better than your way of thinking. There's an opening that occurs. It's this relative truth is usually engaged the way we're talking about it. Universal truth is engaged energetically. And it can happen when you're simply a personality, as we all are. Physical, emotional, mental. Soul structure. The elements of valves are open. And more flow moves in, and there's more energy around us. Are we destined to use that energy for the purpose of engaging with our personalized version of what we think is right versus wrong, good versus bad? My heavens, we're going to run into so many others who don't agree with us. Then, if we have the power, should we annihilate them? It's disturbing. Because if you turn that around, higher states, more able beings in the universe, let's say, should they annihilate us just because we're young? And because they can? That's a simple thing. You grumble with others and put them down and lift them up, and it all depends on what you're thinking. Is that of great value to you? I think it is from time to time. It just makes you feel good because you know you're right and you have no idea what the other person is like. Absolutely not. You believe you do, but you don't. That's a personality truth. Yes, you will become different if you can engage internally and put your focus literally on that flow all the time. There will be moments when you'll put your focus on that flow moving through you because you'll perceive it. Perception is reflexive based on your ability to perceive. If you don't perceive something, it doesn't exist. Or you're frustrated because other people perceive it, and you don't. If you soften down, you can also perceive it. But then what do? Then you attend to your personality, and your personality is where your focus is. There has to be a balance. Both levels are real. Now, this is another question, and this is really difficult question to handle in our world of immaturity, in our world of being young. Better way to say it, because we don't know what maturity is. We have ideas about it, and we have judgments about it, and we have definitions about it. But look at this. Do you see sexual energy as being the same as creative energy? I could probably ask you a lot more questions about this. We're going to blah, 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 blah. Do you see sexual energy as being the same as creative energy? I see sexual energy as being an act of will that supports the comforting of you as an individual. It's also a propagational structure. It also gives pleasure to people. whether you're pleasuring yourself or others, or at the same time, you use that energy, that personally willful energy, because it's your structure, for the purpose of getting what you want, what you need from your perspective. And there's all kinds of good things about that, and also not so great. But your identification with you, related to self-interest, is about the energy form increasing strongly in your view related to the building of an icon or a form called you. Without it, you won't do it. But there's just a little bit of subtlety. Even without it, you automatically kind of are moved into an iconographic form. You are what you seem to be to others. You're lucky. Others assess you based on them. So therefore, if you are a particular way, they're assessing you. If you hear how they're telling you you are, you sometimes take that on. You might also say, well, it's better than the form I already figured out I was. Why not take that one on? Yeah. If you're inclined to do so, you'll do so. If you're inclined not to do so and defend the one you have regardless of what it looks like, because you haven't even taken a look at it yourself and you don't want to, or you might want to, but it's too hard because you're going to start judging yourself, then maybe you can learn to soften down the judgment. Judgment is only one opinion. If you can get others to agree with you, wow, then you have more than one opinion. But right now, the only opinion that you actually have, that you listen to and agree with, is yours. That's an act of will. That relates to sexuality. That's the gonad center. Defensive structure is a form that enables you from the root gonad structure. You have the will to do that, and your emotional intensity dictates how you can struggle to maintain something you don't even know you're attempting to maintain. So this sexuality thing, not a negative thing at all. Yeah, like everything else, it can be overused. And you can manipulate concepts around it just to suit your self-interest, because that's an aspect of how we must function here on this planet. Did everybody hear that? We have to use it to function on the planet. But we tend to use it for our own purposes. It's called manipulation. Whether you're manipulating others or manipulating yourself. Nobody wants to hear that. Exactly. But there's a kindness about that center. It's an engagement with the center that can be softened. It can be redirected into the throat area. These two centers are linked powerfully. The root center can be linked to the top of the head. There's room at the front of the fore, right here, for that center to link. And then there's room for the solar plexus to relate to the heart center and the brow center. Now look. For eons of time, India was a forerunner in the process of bringing energies from the root center and the gonad center up to the top of the head, so that they could perceive the higher states and pull the lower state attitudes into the higher state attitude of worshiping higher states, or linking up with higher states, another way to say it. Very important. Gujarat has temples there that would stimulate the gonad center so you could lift it up. They would run into the temples and they would start mantras related to bringing their attention off of the root gonad center orientations into higher states. And that was a kindness that these individuals were doing for themselves as well as others, because they had an idea that if the upper centers were on, then their focus would not be on the lower centers as much. Did you hear as much? Because they were using the lower centers to stimulate them. So energy follows thought. They were stimulated. The Kundalini was moving, another word for energies, universal, all the way up there, back to the top of their head. And this worked. Where the problem is, the personality entered into it, and when they were stimulated in the lower centers, they felt the pleasure of that stimulation, and the engagement was not one of glowing, it was one of needing. So it got mixed up a bit with some. It didn't get mixed up for others. And two schools split, went in different directions. One was related to sexuality, and the other was related to higher states. When you are engaged with growth as a being who's attempting to be in alignment with higher states, spiritual engagement of some kind, you have two roads. One is self-interest. And it's the most powerful one here. You'll hear spiritual groups fighting each other like crazy, judging other people, and they haven't got a clue what's happened to them. Higher states interact with everybody. They don't have a very difficult time engaging with young folk. Thank goodness for that. We do. We quickly become spiritualized from our perspective and then engage with others in a not so particularly kind way. That's a part of our tradition. We need help here. We need it badly. We need help with respect to an internal kindness that is stimulated by higher states with respect to others who believe slightly different than we do. Otherwise, our focal point is on our lower states. And those higher states will stimulate it because they don't want us to be a bunch of automatons. They will, if you insist, make you what you believe you have to be so that you can figure out with honesty what you're seeing internally, so that you can begin to soften it down and note that it's okay for you to soften down your relationship with you and with others and gain respect for the whole process of internal growth, as opposed to having a pseudo-respect for the greatness that you're involved with no negativity attached to it, and be superior to others. It's the one thing that's consistent in higher states. There's no superiority attached to higher states. They perceive you as you are. That's very disconcerting. If you're honest with yourself, you'll be okay with that. But you won't like it that much. You'll just be okay with it. Be okay with you. Be okay with you and continue to grow. Recognize what you're protecting and what you're engaging with. It will be tough enough to do that. You are a complex, complicated being. I don't care who you are. You have a bunch of lives coming together in a composite of form, and you can't perceive that that's occurring. Oh, you can wish fulfill and you can engage with and say whatever you say, but nonetheless, your perception level is really at the level of your engagement with how you think you are as important or unimportant as you are. You are all important because there is a link with higher states in you already. That flow has come into you at whatever level you are from a higher state to give you intensity, growth, flow. And you've used it to create a personality. And you keep renewing the same thing. Because we're all scared that we won't renew the same way. And we know the true definition of spirituality is you times 1,000. That's scary enough. Hopefully that never happens, or we're all in trouble. Perhaps. But you may think you wouldn't be in trouble. That's where the dilemma is. We'll all be pretty nervous about that one. I hope this has been of some interest to somebody. Some people I may have put to sleep. Other people will just be saying, oh my God, do I really want to grow spiritually? I will have to leave the great me behind. No, you don't leave you behind. Recognize the traditional pathway that you've come through. Don't negate it. Understand the dilemmas of that pathway. Recognize them and try to be respectful of yourself and help you in as soft and gentle a manner as possible. Ask for it. And you will be helping others who've had a similar road. It's the way of a higher state, not a lower state. The way of a higher state is enabling others where they can be enabled, not for their own personalized version of the besting of others, but the relationship with others that relates to higher states. To be able to have energy flow through you for the benefit of another is an honorable thing. I wish you all well. Have a good evening, and have a good meditation. Take care.